Okay, welcome to the Forensics Detailing channel. We're going to do a review of my new old Carrera 996 4S. Let's start her up. It's nice. The reversing sensor faults come back. Comes and goes intermittently. Okay guys, so I want to talk about the styling. Now, the first thing is the 996. The 996 was always considered the ugly duckling of the Porsche range. Porsche made a deviation with the headlight design from all of their other ranges, where you've got that fried egg shape. And I think they learned very rapidly that if you deviate with something that's fundamental to the design, then the fans of your mark will rebel against it. And the peasants are revolting. So it's much maligned for the way it looks on the front end, but 20 years later now with this car, which is a 2003, I think the headlight styling is less of an issue. The side profile of the car looks lovely, it's sleek. The rear is beefy with those wide body arches, the strip lighting across the back. Yes, the rear tail lights with that white reversing light section can look a bit dated, so I might tint over those like I know some people do to make it sort of melt in a little bit better into that kind of rear light. The strip. The front of the car looks nice. Obviously you've got those classic kind of Porsche wings or fenders that run along the lines of the car and create that classic Porsche shape. I think personally the car looks stunning, but I think part of the review has to say it might not be the nicest looking 997 out of 911 out of all of them. You might give that to the 997, the 991, the 964, the 992. Take your pick. Okay, the next thing, reliability. Well, a lot of people talk about the IMS bearing being an issue. So if you're buying one, the perceived wisdom seems to be to make sure the IMS has been done or get it done, and get a bore score check on the engine to make sure that the engine's in good health and you're not getting oil into the cylinders, burning that, or getting any puffs of smoke when you start it up. Very important. Apart from that, I think it's good to have the coolant, the radiators replaced, because they're at the front, they've got to circulate to the back of the engine. I think there could be problems with that. Otherwise, you're looking for a full comprehensive service history, regularly serviced, well maintained and loved. So get it checked over. Yes, you're going to find a few rusty bolts underneath it and the odd niggle, but it's those core issues of IMS bearing and engine bore scoring that you want to get checked out. So let's just drop this down a gear and give it a good rev out. Foot flat to the floor. It gets going above 4,000 revs. It's got a good amount of power. So let's cover the basics. We've just done the reliability and the styling. The engine, this has got a flat 3.6 6-cylinder engine. It delivers quite a lot of power, 320 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 of 5.1 seconds, which is impressive for a 20 odd year old car, 25-year-old design car, whatever you want to call it. But the main thing I think with the engine is the way that it really starts building the power, almost like a crescendo, that you don't tend to get with the turbocharged engines, which are a bit beefier low down when that turbo kicks in. This, you have to really kind of build it. There. Just as before you hit that rev limiter, you're on the absolute kind of peak, it feels like. That's nice. The car feels like it's got plenty of power, and that sort of performance figure of 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds is still reasonably quick for a modern car. I don't think you'd want to play around with this and try and make it any faster. You take it for what it is, a very good performing car for its age. Next up, the brakes, guys. They've got these Porsche 4-pop brakes with drilled and vented discs. I'm not sure if it's servo actuated. The brake pedal is a little bit softer and less crisp than I'm used to on a kind of modern car, but the car still stops well, and the brake balance on this car is particularly good. How these brakes hold up and the pads hold up to abuse and track use, I don't know, and I don't really care, but I've got enough confidence that I can stop this car. if I need to on a road, which is decent. The pedals, something that are very important on the car. The clutch pedal, its natural position is quite high, and the gap between the clutch pedal and the place where you rest your foot is very narrow, and I clip, you can hear that? The clutch pedals, I try and get my foot into that gap to rest it. So you can find yourself riding the clutch a little bit, and you also need to adjust the seat position back, because if you're too close to that clutch pedal, I can find my knee knocking on the steering wheel, and I can't adjust the steering wheel to get it out of the way. But I've got it set up pretty nicely now where I feel comfortable and I'm not cracking my knee against the steering wheel. The brake and the accelerator pedal are really nicely positioned, that you can just press the brake with the left side of your foot when you're changing down. So if you're braking and you want to change down, you can blip the throttle and get it into your gear. You know, play around with downshifting and rev matching and all that sort of stuff. Really nicely done that is, and the weighting of the accelerator pedal is just about right. It's not too heavy, not too light, feels really, really good. Next up, another real positive is the steering feel on this car. You really notice that the engine is in the back of the car and there's less weight on the front, so there's a slight lightness to the steering when you're turning. And because the car has got all that weight at the back and really wide 295 tyres on the back, there's a different dynamic to this car, and that dynamic is all about you being able to put the power down without fighting against the car or feeling it squirming. The four-wheel drive adds to that, and we'll talk about that later on. But the first thing I noticed about this Porsche is the confidence you can have in really using the power going into corners and coming out of corners. You almost have to drive it slightly differently to a BMW, where you're really worried about the throttle response. I'm just going to overtake this car and put my foot down. So yeah, the steering's really nice, very, very well weighted, just about the right sort of speed. The way it actuates the turning is good. It does float around a little bit because it's an older car with a hydraulic rack, so you can see the steering wheel moving a little bit with the terrible roads here in the UK. Next thing I want to talk about is the exhaust. Now this car has the Porsche sports exhaust option on it, so you can turn it to, or it's on sports mode by default, and you can turn that off if you want to. The exhaust sounds absolutely lovely. When you first start the car up, it's got a nice growl to it, with a hint of Lord Melchett from Blackadder with that bar. It's got a hint of the bar. It's just a lovely sound. There's no like pops and bangs. It's not drony. It's just a really growly exhaust that is lovely to hear, especially if you get the window down. You can really feel it, and it adds a lot to the driving experience. So I'd definitely try and stock that Porsche sports exhaust, or spec it on one, you know, buy one with it if you can. Do you want to modify exhaust to make it pop and bang and growl? It's not in keeping with the car, and I think the exhaust system that they've put on it with this sports exhaust is absolutely perfect, and I love it. What's next? Seats. Okay, seats are really important. Now, most of you will be fine, but with my broad shoulders, muscles, you know, barrel chest, I do notice that I don't cup fully into this seat quite properly, and the top half of my body slides out. It's lacking bolster support on the top section, which is fine for the road, but on the track you would be hanging onto the steering wheel a little bit, but it's not really a track car, so I'm okay with that. The lower or midsection bolster as well, I feel it pinching on my back a little bit, again with my broad ribs and bones. Sorry. And my arse is a little bit pinched by the lower bolsters, so it's not a perfect seat for me, but it's not bad. It's quite slidey as well, the leather on it. So we're just going to take a turn down here and give this a nice little blip. Whoa, whoa. Right, let's get on the gas. Oh, I love that. I love that. It feels like the back end of this car is just super glued to the road. The front can be a little bit light under that acceleration, but it's going to be, isn't it? But it handles really, really nice. Okay, onto the suspension. Now the suspension setup is a stiff sporty suspension that on smooth roads would be absolutely flawless. It'd be brilliant. The reality though is that the UK roads are bumpy. There's lots of potholes and surface delamination. It's technical, and the ride can be a bit crashy on UK roads, and there's not much you can do about that. So if you're sensitive to a hard ride, you might want to consider that when you're buying one of these. But really, with a sports car, do you want a soft ride? Some of you might say yes. The ideal situation is an adaptive suspension system that would be really comfortable and softer for the UK roads, and being able to put it into a harder setting when you've got good roads or when you're on a smooth track or something like that. So yeah, that is a compromise. The next thing, we've got a nice corner here. Let's just get on the power after this corner. Let's flip it down. Get on that power. Oh, that's the rev limiter. So it limits out at 7,500 revs. We've got 320 brake horsepower, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 5.1. If I haven't already said that. Never do a car detailing video in one take. Now, the four-wheel drive. This is something to consider. You really want to ask yourself, if you want a more playful car at the rear end, something where you're pulling out of a junction, you can turn the traction control off and spin up the rear wheels a little bit, you know, and then like correct it. You're probably the 4S might not be the car for you. This car seems to just be really good at putting the power down in a really stable way that gives you a hell of a lot of confidence. Forgive the juddering camera. Gives you a hell of a lot of confidence to drive the car hard, and I like it. But I think this is like a little taster for me of driving a 4S. I think, all things being equal, I would want a rear-wheel drive manual Porsche. Consider that. It just depends what you want out of the car. If you want something to tear around on the roads and something that's going to place its power down better, then the 4S isn't bad. It doesn't feel that compromised by being four-wheel drive. In fact, a lot of people will prefer it. It's just something to consider and make your decision on. The next thing is the cockpit. The quality of the upholstery and all the leather and all the fixtures and fittings inside this car feel really, really good. It's got a full extended leather dashboard, and it just feels like a luxurious place to be. Yes, it's a little dated, but I love that. It makes me feel like I'm in an old car. The stock stereo sound system with the Bose speakers is actually really good as well. It's got a six slot CD player in the boot, a CD player in the front. It's got sat nav. The only thing is this Porsche system, whatever it's called, has so many buttons on it, and it is a bit hard to get used to. And like, you're searching around for buttons. Modern cars, they've just done that better now, so it does take a bit getting used to. And the climate control, the aircon stuff, is tucked behind the gear lever, so you can't always see it. You have to move your head and like look what you're doing to kind of change all the buttons. It's not quite as easy. Your door glass switches are right in the middle of the car, which I actually like once you get used to the fact they're going to be there. Being a BMW driver with the E36, it's the same, so I'm kind of used to that. So overall, yeah, the cabin is a nice place to be. It's specced up to the eyeballs, this one, with the sports seats and all that interior carbon. And I think if you can get one that's got the extended leather, I don't think you're going to ever find one with all this Porsche carbon interior. That's very rare. But definitely you'd want to spec the sports exhaust, or get one with a sports exhaust, unless you're planning on doing that. The gearbox on this car is good. There's quite a long throw. There's a little bit of play in it. I was chatting to someone the other day about it, and they said you put the 997 kit in there, shifter kit, and it just gives you a better gear change. I'm not sure if I'll do that. It's not bad enough that I need to do that. The gear change is good. It's just a little bit long when you're going top to bottom, but the gear knob feels really, really nice. Yeah, so I personally probably won't change the gearbox or make any real modifications to this car. So guys, overall conclusions: should you get a Porsche 996 Carrera 4S? We've covered the reasons why you shouldn't. What's the competition? Well, something like an E46 M3 might be something that you might want to consider, because it's got that character to it and it's a nice revvy engine. Let's just use this to do a rev. Ooh. See what I mean about bumps? Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Good place to conclude the video. You've got the E46 M3, which is great. Similar price point of around 20 to 30,000 pounds for a decent one. Maybe a little bit cheaper with the M3, but then that can have its own issues. What else are you competing with? Well, the main thing, guys, is you're going to know if you want a Porsche or not. And if you do want a Porsche, you might be competing with the Gen 1 or even the Gen 2 997s. Perhaps the Gen 1 really is a better price match, and you could argue that the Gen 1 looks slightly better with the more traditional front round headlights. It's more in keeping with what Porsche normally do. So beyond the 997, really, what have you got? Lotus? TVR? What other sort of sports car have you got? Because that's going to be the deciding thing. If you're going for a sports car, it's going to be reasonably stiff. The back seats are always going to be useless, and the back seats in this are about as much use as a kick in the knackers. They really are. But I don't care. I didn't buy it to be practical. You know, the boot space at the front, who knows what it is? You can get a couple of bags in there. It's good enough for me. What I wanted from this car is something which is a real joy to drive and a real experience, and has me reaching for the keys over my other cars. And so far, I know it's new and I'm in the honeymoon period, I have a real craving to just go and drive this car around the roads and really drive it quite hard within the speed limits, of course. So overall, yes, if you like the look of the 996, if you're in love with Porsches, then this is a great way to get into Porsche. And the good thing about the 996, particularly the 4S, is I think they're only going to go one way in value, which is north. The Australian market couldn't buy 996s, and now they're rolling over 20 years old. The Australian market is importing a lot of them from the UK, which is creating a demand and driving up prices for the right cars. So if you can find a nice one with all its history, that's been serviced, well maintained, well looked after, yes, expect a few niggles, expect a few rusty bolts underneath, but if it's fundamentally sound and well specced, it will be desirable. I think personally you want to go for the manual. Colours up to you. Look for the sports seats, look for the sports exhaust, and if you can find one with a carbon interior, you're laughing. Then just enjoy it, maintain it, and if you ever want to move up the Porsche ladder, which I might want to do one day, then you're going to be in a better position from having owned this, in terms of knowing what Porsche is all about, and financially as well, because it should appreciate in value. Yes, the servicing costs are a little bit higher. Yes, some of the parts costs can be higher, and the Porsche tax. But to run this, the insurance for me, I paid extra to have the legal cover, 30 quid extra, and I'm paying about 280 quid. Without that, it'd have been about 250, and I'm paying by direct debit monthly. If I'd done a yearly payment, it'd have been down to about 220 quid insurance. And I'm an arsehole driver. No one should insure me for that little. I'm being serious. So there we go, guys. Should you get a Porsche 996, if you're thinking about it, you've already probably got the bug. And if you haven't got the bug, you will have when you drive one. It's an absolute yes from me. It's a class car, it looks class, it drives so good, gives you everything you want from in terms of driving experience, in terms of the engine dynamics, the way it revs, you know, the firmness of it, the chassis, the way it goes around corners, the way it's so planted to the road and you can really drive it hard. That is different to most cars I've experienced. So my advice, don't wait, because they're going to go up in price. Go and get yourself the right one. Comment back what you think. Comment back what other alternatives there might be. And don't forget, the most important thing, my throat's going, don't forget to subscribe to the Forensics Detailing channel. If not for the production value, for the sheer comedy value. Take care, guys, and I will see you soon. Over and out.